My recent trip to India led me to one core conclusion. If you want to be in a country with the most diverse ways to think about and do theological education, go to India. I was there for about a week or so, and during that week, I met with about 30 seminary leaders from across the country. And they came together to share their stories about theological education in India. And what I learned and what I gleaned is absolutely remarkable and fascinating. And I want to share all that with you. So I'm going to be doing that over the course of this video and another video. Over these two videos, I want to share with you what I began to glean from these seminary leaders in India about how to begin to reimagine theological education together. This is my third time in India, and I plan to return back there again as the Lord may allow me to do so. But let me share some numbers and stats about India because it's a fascinating place, a fascinating country. Right now, it is the largest country in the world, just having surpassed China in 2023. India has 1.451 billion with a B people. But listen to this. It has under the age of 35, India has 943 million people. That is just remarkable because think about the United States. The United States has 340 million in total. And in India, they have almost 943 million under the age of 35. Delhi, its capital, the city alone has 35 million people and will surpass Tokyo as the largest city in the world by 2028. For me, during this trip, I was mostly in Chennai. This is a small city in India. It only holds about 12 million people at this present time. The people in India are so diverse, incredible context there. 22 official languages, but over 1,600 different languages and dialects. Hindus make up about 80%, Islam 14%, Christians, they say 2%. People on the ground will tell you that they're more than that. Let me tell you a little bit more about this gathering that we had. This was a gathering of it was 27 seminary leaders from across the country. And the reason we did this is because I've observed two things among many, but here are two things that I've observed as I've traveled and interacted with seminary leaders around the world. Many of them are isolated, and many of them have little to no margin or space or time to rest and reflect in their lives. Isolation and no margin is what I've discovered in many of the leaders around the world. Years ago, I did something about this in Cuba when I gathered people, seminary leaders, to have a time for them to hear from each other, learn about each other's programs, learn about possible ways they can collaborate and share ideas, share resources, and so on, but also time for them to rest and reflect and think about what they need to be thinking about for their programs, because in the day-to-day life, their margin is so small, they don't have any time for that. And so I partnered with ATA India. ATA stands for Asia Theological Association. ATA is part of the ISET global community. As you've heard me talk about ISET in other videos, the International Council for Evangelical Theological Education. I have the privilege to lead ISET at the present time as its executive director. And we have regional associations, and Asia Theological Association, ATA, is our regional association for ISET in that region of the world. And ATA has nearly 400 schools in their network. But ATA India alone has 196 schools. And those schools combined serve over 20,000 students that are preparing formally for through theological education for the church in India in that context. I share with my wife, Kathy, this is a remarkable opportunity, I said, because I get to learn about 27 seminaries without having to visit 27 seminaries. We had them all come together in one place to have them think about each other's programs. So kind of strip away the isolation piece, right? And have them learn from each other, have them hear from each other's programs, but also give them a time to rest and relax and do some things that might be a little bit more fun. My role was to be there. I spoke, I did a few things, but really they were the focus for the few days that we were together. Each seminary leader had about 20 minutes to share about their successes in their programs, their challenges in their programs, and what they were learning about leadership during their leadership time at their seminaries. So that's what they did during our time together, but we also had rest time. I mentioned isolation and margins. We wanted to create a little bit of margin for them. And there was a pool there at the facility. And I can tell you that there was some remarkable times around the pool, great conversations. I went into the pool one time with them, and they were having a conversation about AI and how do you use AI in theological education today. One gentleman from a large seminary, historical seminary in India, came up to me during one of the evening sessions, and he said, Dr. Michael, I got to tell you, this has been great. I've not had a chance to laugh and interact with people like this in a long time. So in that sense, I feel like the Lord allowed us to have time for these folks, these key leaders, both men and women that were there. Women are leading seminaries in India as well, having them all come together and not just hear from each other, but learn how to rest a little bit and think about their programs in a new way. But here are some things that I began to glean and write about and journal about as I was interacting with and just listening and watching them. It was just fascinating, right? These key seminary leaders up in front and speaking to all of us, including their colleagues from across the country, about their successes, challenges, and what they were learning about theological education and leadership in theological education in India today. I'm going to go through a number of things that I discovered. And in this video, I'm going to go through one key part of what I discovered. And the next video, I will carry forward and share with you what else I discovered along the way. Are realizing that funding that they relied upon from the West, from the US, North America, and other parts of the world, Europe and Australia and so on, those funds are becoming more and more difficult to get in. And I heard from seminaries that all of a sudden they realize we've got no funding. What do we do? Okay. And so here are some things that I heard from some of the schools about this very important topic. And those of you that are involved in ministry, no matter what kind of ministry you're involved in, no matter if it's formal, non-formal, and whatever church ministry you do, we know that funding is crucial. If it's not for funding, how can we continue to move forward? Let me tell you about some of the ways that Indian seminary leaders are reimagining theological education funding. I'll share about a number of these. Okay, here's the first one. There's a seminary in India that has started a rose farm. Yes, roses. They have 160,000 rows of roses. They have this land, it's outside, it's away from their seminary campus, but they have this land that they have developed, and it's become this place to develop and grow roses. And I was there, not this trip, but the trip before. It's absolutely remarkable, and they're beautiful roses. And they're selling these roses all over the world. But they are doing this, and they're beginning to generate funds for the seminary and all their programs. There's another one that has a roadside restaurant. It's on a main road, and they decided to start a restaurant, and they're selling food. Another one has hospitals. Another one has a K through high school educational program, and there are people that are able to pay for that, and that's helping sustain the rest of the seminary's work. There's farming that's taking place. There's a water plant that's one seminary is doing. There's a seminary that has garments. They're showing people how to develop and do garments and sell them. They're also supported by some churches as well, especially the Baptist denomination has 111 churches in Northeast India, and that's helping to provide funding for the seminaries in that part of the country. And there are many other ways that they're doing this. But here's one thing that I also picked up on. As these seminary leaders were sharing their struggles financially, and others were sharing these innovative ways to provide for funding despite the FCRA limiting funding from the West, it was fascinating to hear how they were encouraging one another and how they were uplifting one another. Here's a quote from one of the seminary leaders when he said, "We need to be willing to be vulnerable and correct our courses." We need to be willing to be vulnerable and correct our courses. This is a way of thinking about reimagining theological education. We need to be vulnerable and realize what we used to do in the past may not be working any longer. Depending on the West for funding may not always be there. We need to be thinking about new ways, reimagining the way we fund our programs. And for this video, let me conclude by sharing this one story. This is remarkable. Back in 1986, one of the seminaries, through their founder and others, they bought 40 acres on a plot of land. They bought 40 acres, and that land was far off the beaten path. I mean, it was out in the middle of nowhere. And for months and years, these seminary leaders were told, you should just sell that land. You're never going to build there. You're never going to be able to do anything with that land. But they persisted. And in fact, the leader of that seminary would take his family there on the weekends. And it was a drive. It was a way out there. He would take his family there on the weekends. And when they would go there, they would walk the property and he would pray. Now, that property has been built up. That property has multiple ministries that are helping to support the seminary, including a culinary school. I mean, agriculture. They have a gymnasium that they use not just for their students, others on campus, but they invite others to come in and pay to use the gym, the fitness center. I mean, it's remarkable what they've done. And now that property is at the very center of growth in this part of India. And you can't buy land now. But here was a man who had a vision that God had given him, and back in 1986, and the Lord laid it on his heart saying, there's a new way of thinking about theological education. There's a new way of reimagining it. And here's a piece of land. Go and do something with it. And what the Lord has done with that is absolutely remarkable. So that's just one of the stories, one of the discoveries that I gleaned from my time with these seminary leaders in India. And join me for the next video as I continue to share more from my experience recently with these nearly 20 seminary leaders from across India as we continue to reimagine theological education together.